there could be a bunch of other people in this world that never had somebody say, I'm damn proud of you. I think one of the best things a leader can do in a business is to do all the tasks that everybody does within a business, because it gives you the ability to have a conversation, not just, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, here's the resources, this is a place to get this information. You can be a better guide for them. And it really just comes down to caring at the end of the day. One of my favorite quotes of all times is, those who care more win more.
And that's like world-class patience of letting your team make the decision, potentially fuck it up, dent the car, but not total it, as in ruining the business.
You're guiding them on a path, but not manipulating them. That's a very fine line.
If you influence somebody, you're leading them to something that's going to benefit them. If you manipulate them, you're leading to something that's only going to benefit you.
Most people aren't wired to be like the four of us entrepreneurs. Most people are wired to support entrepreneurs. But the only way you can get the best out of them is to get them to think differently, to think better about themselves, to think creatively about a problem, and to become a problem solver.
There could be a bunch of other people in this world that never had somebody say, I'm damn proud of you.
Yep.
And you knowing the value of what that is and just pouring into somebody about that is huge. That's one of the most rewarding feelings I think a human can get.
If you want team and loyalty and all that different shit, and you want people to stay with you long term, you got to get good at what we're talking about right here.
This is Sparta!
All right, so we are gathering here today, which is awesome. I appreciate you lending us your space to have a joint conversation.
Well, to have an awesome conversation.
Yeah, have an awesome. This is going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Anytime we can be in the studio live and have awesome people having conversation, we know there's going to be impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, and here we are, man.
So here we are. So, Stefan, what is the conversation that you guys on leadership? I think going into your story a little bit would kick us off pretty damn well.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a hell of a story.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I appreciate you having us here too. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And you guys, all three of you guys do a great job in this topic, specifically in leadership and coaching and helping. And kind of what kicked us off, Chris, when you and I started talking and really dove into that story, this is a space I definitely want to spend a little bit more time in. And I think down the road, having my own podcast and doing things like that would certainly be great. But so I'm a second generation business owner. My dad started a company 54 years ago. It's in manufacturing. It's super niche. We're basically involved in the metal part making industry. But for myself, I was in and out of this company since I was 14 years old. When I got to 18, as a young, kind of not smart, not visionary kind of kid, I was like, you know what, Pop, you work way too many hours. You're like 60, 70 hours a week. This is ridiculous. I want to do my own way. So I went out, studied finance and economics, and had a lot of fun in that industry and learned a lot about people. And I think that's where a lot of my personal leadership skills started to come into play, because not only did I have to understand myself and how to present things on multiple different topics in a way that was fluid for people to understand, but you're having conversations, like Josh, specifically, you're having conversations with people about the thing that's most important to them is the money that they have so they can live their lives, right? And they can take care of their families, they can do things that are really important. So kind of navigating those waters of people's emotions and talking about hard topics, especially when because the company I worked for, we did some work in the estate planning side, and those are hard conversations. Greg, there's two more on the insurance side. How to properly get that message across in a way where it helps them make decisions. So I worked in that business for a little while. Then I started to lose interest, and I've always been kind of technically wired. How do these things work? How does equipment work? How does technology work, and so forth? So I sat down with my dad, came back to the business, and basically started working my way through the company from like sales and contracts job, which was like the customer liaison, right? So I was the guy basically customer to office. How does this all work? And then I started taking on roles within the company as managers left the business. So our field service manager moved to California with his wife. We had a vacancy. Nobody wanted to take it. Nobody in the team was ready to take that role on. I was like, I know people. I don't know programming and how to check the furnaces out, but I can manage the people side to this. They need to be coordinated. They need to know their priorities. You need to kind of motivate them, and they're on the road. They need some help, right? Then our shop manager was separated from the business. Nobody was running the shop. I was like, I can take it, right? What does this job entail? Leading people, leading priorities, motivating them, keeping them safe, and going forward with that. So I kept moving my way through the business by just saying yes, not knowing specifically what the needs were, but just like saying yes, because I knew people. and I knew how to be there for people. And it really just comes down to caring at the end of the day. One of my favorite quotes of all times is, those who care more win more. So I moved that through. Then I had an opportunity to go to Germany, and I worked for a customer of ours and learned all the stuff that happens before equipment, because my ultimate goal was to take the business over. Sales, business development, marketing, and so forth. So I needed to be able to really converse with people on the topic the way that my dad did, kind of growing up in the technology. Came back from Germany, took on basically the GM role of the business, and I was in charge of every different department. That's where it really started to hone into leadership and people. And I was drawing, funny enough, I was drawing on a lot of the stuff I learned back in finance. So, and you guys have probably all done this, Greg, we talked about it a bunch of times, like that 3-bucket theory of you can control, you can't control, and you can influence, right? I think you talked about this a little bit yesterday.
A little bit differently, but yeah.
A little bit differently. So the only thing you can control is yourself, right? So when you're in a meeting with somebody and you're trying to inspire somebody or get them to do something, you're not going to control that situation, never. You can influence it, and you get much, much better at influencing based on how you present these topics, or based on how you present what the resources are that they have. And then there's that bucket of, I can't do anything about it, right? So if it's going to rain today and you got to go for a run, or you got to go do something and you got to still do that, you can't control it. So knowing that going into conversations with my team as I was starting to lead them, it allowed me to kind of control the conversation a lot better and control my emotions to it. Because if the decision wasn't made, or if the outcome wasn't where it was, but it wasn't my decision to make, I would separate myself from that, knowing I gave it my best. Maybe I'll have to come back and try again. Right? So you guys have probably had situations like this when you're coaching your team. There's a lot of times you want the outcome to be X, and it's your job to sell it, so to speak, but you're not making the decision yourself. And that's something a really good leader needs to find a way to separate. You can't control the outcome of somebody else's decision. Like, I can put $100 on the floor, I can tell you to go up and get it, but it's still your choice to go get it. And that's like the basic way to really think about leadership. So then I moved into the leadership role of the company back in 2019. Company's grown from 9 million to 19 million. We're moving to Charlotte from New Jersey over the summer here, which is going to be an incredibly fun, stressful, exciting, joyful, every emotion under the sun kind of moment. But it's cool. And I draw back on so many things I learned in finance and just so many moments that I've been in to lead the team that I have, to change the culture we have. And I think one of the best things a leader can do in a business, especially if they had an opportunity, is to do all the tasks that everybody does within a business, because it gives you the ability to have a conversation, not just, I need you to do this, I need you to do this, here's the resources, this is a place to get this information. You can be a better guide for them. Yeah.
Did you face any longtime employees that were throwing shade because you were the boss's son?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It wasn't that bad as some of the stories I'm sure you guys have all heard. But when I came back in, I was 27, right? So naturally, everybody looked at me as the owner's son. And they're like, oh, here comes daddy's son. You know, he's coming in to take the business over. And like most second generation or third generation business owners, they're just in it because they think it's a paycheck for them.
Yeah.
Right? And even to today, like, there's been plenty of times we've gone through reviews with our team and done raises for everybody. And like, I might not have done that all the time. I might not have just paid myself a raise. The team needs it. The team needs to be invested in, and so forth. But to the point of your question, there was plenty of times where I'd be sitting with somebody who was 50 or 60, been in the business for 15 years. I had two things that worked for me. One, I knew a lot of those guys since I was a kid working there the first time. So I had a little bit of a relationship with them. The other side was in finance. My age group of my clientele was 21 to 91. So I knew how to have a conversation with people that were of an older generation than me and get them to trust me about a topic that I know. And the best thing, especially because when I came back to the business and I was kind of running the shop, I didn't know all the, welding fixes and repairs and everything that needs to be done from a mechanical point of view, but I know my team knew it. So the decisions that I made a lot of time as the leader was, let me go get 3, 4, 5 people together. And I always try to make it an odd number. So if I didn't have to make the decision, if I didn't know, somebody would make the decision as a collective group. But sometimes you certainly have to be the one that makes that call. But you got to give people the opportunity, the experts of the technology, or the experts of the subject matter, speak it out, listen to what they're saying, hear them well, and then collectively make a group decision for what it is. Yeah. So I built a lot of trust in the people by letting them basically be part of the decision making. And I think that's what's allowed me to have a great trajectory within the company. And I never was there just to get a paycheck. I was there to take this business over and make it basically from an incredible legacy that my dad's built and a reputation as a business, there's a whole new level of things we want to do and take over.
So you led by empowering your team.
That's it. I let them make a lot of the decisions because I know, listen, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, right? What I do know is I'm really good at working together with people.
Right.
I care a shit ton about people, and I care about them either being part of making decisions, and I care a lot about seeing these people grow within their own roles. I mean, there's been plenty of people, we've been promoting people within different roles because I can see what they're going to be doing in 10 years. They don't see it yet. You guys have probably all had stories about this, right?
Of course.
You can see the trajectory of a person before they can see it themselves.
And you believe in them before they believe in themselves a lot of times.
Yeah, I actually want to ask one of you guys, whoever wants to take this, but what's one of the best stories you have in that moment? And how did you kind of get them over that hump? Because they were fighting you along the way, and then eventually they're like, oh my God, he had my back the whole time.
So
we've got a moment. Like
I want to jump in because I want to tell you two things. Well, one, where you're talking about how you mentioned he empowers people. That reminds me of a leadership lesson that I learned when I was in the military as a young officer. A lot of times when we do meetings as leaders, we come in and maybe there's a decision needs to be made. And I saw this, I witnessed this quite a bit. Leader comes in and says, hey, here's the problem. This is what I'm thinking, X, Y, Z. And then let me know what you guys think.
And then they all agree with the leader.
Exactly. You plant the seed.
Yeah.
You planted a seed, even though unintentionally.
Right.
And so I had this leader that basically was like, no, what you do is say, here's the problem.
What do you think?
You already may have a 90% solution in your head, but you don't say what you think because you're going to get way more open feedback from everybody. And then everyone's going to actually be more honest and you'll see a compare and contrast between all the ideas.
Yeah.
And then at the end, you can be the last one to speak and to say, hey, I like what you said. I'm going to implement that. I already had this much of the plan ready. I don't like this idea. I don't think that's going to work. I like this. I like that. I don't like this. And then you can basically say, this is what the plan's going to be. But it shows that you took the time to listen, understand, and show empathy, and then either add it to the plan or not.
And have patience, which is, for me, some of the hardest things to do in life, let alone leadership.
Yeah.
Having patience for your team to actually problem solve and come up with the idea. And our good friend, I didn't mean to interrupt, our good friend Aaron Opluski, he has a really good quote that he said a bunch of times when we were all working together. You got to let your team dent the car without totaling it. Mm-hmm. And that's like world-class patience of letting your team make the decision, potentially fuck it up, dent the car, but not total it, as in ruining the business. And I don't mean to take it over. It's just, in leadership, I think that's some of the hardest things to do, in my opinion, especially in the civilian sector. Mm-hmm. Because in the military sector, your bottom line isn't affected, but the life is. Yeah. In the civilian sector, it's the bottom line, right? Will the company make it feasibly? So what you're doing is incredible. And I love how humble he is about it. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
Let me just take a second, and I've watched you with your team. You're really good at this too. There's been so many times I've watched you, like with Paola and some of the other team members, where they're trying to get something, that they want to say something, or they're thinking about an idea, and you're like, well, how does that make you feel? What do you think about that? You encourage them to get their thoughts out in a way that's amazing. So I just want to give you props for that. I've watched it.
Thank you. Josh and I have talked about that a little bit on an extent too. For me personally, my keyword last year at 37 years old was patience. Patience, Chris, right? I want to be world class when it comes to patience. You know, like, is my patience good for a normal human? Yeah, probably, but world class. So I've had to really slow down at planting the seed. Well, this is what I think the answer is. What do you think? Because you can get the answer quickly that way, but is it the most effective? We've talked about this a bit. You have good questions that you ask. Yeah,
it's one of those things where asking yourself better questions is first and foremost.
Exactly.
And making sure that you question your beliefs. But then the more you can question your team members to get them thinking along the lines, and you're guiding them on a path, but not manipulating them. Mm-hmm. That's a very fine line.
It's the difference between influence and manipulation is if you influence somebody, you're leading them to something that's going to benefit them. Right. If you manipulate them, you're leading to something that's only going to benefit you, and it will probably be a discouragement towards them.
Because at the end of the day, that empowerment that you mentioned from the get-go is to get them to a spot where they're the strongest they could possibly be on that team. Because most people aren't wired to be like the four of us entrepreneurs. Most people are wired to support entrepreneurs. But the only way you can get the best out of them is to get them to think differently, to think better about themselves, to think creatively about a problem, and to become a problem solver. So that, because if you, at the end of the day, they're coming to you for every single decision. Actually, good story. Alicia and I were at the flooring place for the remodel at the house, and these little 4-inch transitions between the doors. They're asking me these questions, and in my head, I couldn't even picture it. Like I'm picturing, like, how is that going to look? Like all this different stuff. I was like, and the Alicia and the woman that was helping us kept asking questions. I was like, you know what? I look at Alicia. I was like, you got this.
You're on it.
I was like, I don't want to make this decision. I trust you. Like, let's just go, because there's other decisions that need to be made. And like, we as leaders will struggle with decision fatigue. So if you're the only one making decisions at every given time from the smallest of things, like, no, your best value add is up here. You need to make these big strategic visionary decisions, not the 4-inch transitions between doorways. So that just happened last week, made me think of
the decision fatigue is real, is absolutely real. And if you have a good person under you or a couple people under you, like Josh and Stefan and Greg do, it helps greatly and it allows you to tackle the big fish. But even with the big fish, I don't know about you guys, I say this as humbly as possible. I typically know the answer. Sometimes I'm not 100% positive, but I typically know the answer. But I really want to hear what everybody around me has to say. And a lot of times it does influence my decision on the higher level decisions. Do you guys feel the same way? Yeah.
I was going to add to this, because this is what you were saying before, is how giving people the ability to make contribution, right? So to gain trust and belonging in your team is get them involved in decisions. But the thing that's most powerful that I've seen for myself, which, you know, for all the listeners that are going to be listening to this, that are in leadership roles where maybe you don't know all the right questions to ask and so forth, the best question is get your team around you and ask them what they want to do. Because there's been plenty of times where I went in thinking I knew the right answer, but because of the contributions of everybody else, while it sometimes still came back to me, my decision was altered by the contribution of the other people. So there's a lot of power in learning. If you don't know it all right now, be comfortable enough to say, you know what do you guys think? Because it will help you get better at making decisions based on the contributions of others.
And you just did this, right? You're moving 20,000 square feet to 60,000 or something
50,
20 to 50. And you let your entire shop design the shop. You had nothing to do with it.
So, and this is something, again, taking some time to get to know who you are.
We're talking multi-million-dollar decisions.
Yeah. What I know that I'm really good at is looking at what somebody... looking at what some people, like looking at somebody put a plan together. And my dad taught me a lot of this when I was little. It was like, people are going to come to you and they think they have the greatest idea under the sun. And it might be the greatest idea, right? But as the leader of a business, you got to play devil's advocate. You got to try to shoot holes in these things, not to shoot it down, but just to see whether they thought about everything that they need to think about. So my guys designed the team in the shop, and I like that because they're the ones that are going to be running the shop at the end of the day. Obviously, you know, I'm going to contribute where I can, but my better, what I'm really, really good at is taking a look at what they had. Is, hey, did you think of this? You know, they put a 12-foot aisle in the receiving area. I'm like, well, how are you going to bring the frames in that are 12 feet long or 15 feet long? Did you think about that? Oh, shit, we got to pivot. We got to move this. We got to move this. So those are things as a leader. If you let your team do the work, which is really cool because then they get engagement and buy into it, your job is to try to think, did they ask themselves all the right questions? And then you don't have the pressure of designing the whole thing. It's like putting together a PowerPoint presentation, right? Like if you don't know what you're doing, it's really good if you just build an outline real quick and then review the outline. It's like, oh, we got to add this, we got to add this, we got to add this, and then go build a PowerPoint or build a mission.
Also, if you ask the right questions in the right way, what you're doing is you're getting them to think about those problems beforehand. Yeah. So the next time that happens, instead of just saying, you could have come in and said, hey, when you design this, make sure you plan for this, that, the other. Those could be potential pitfalls. I just want to save you time. Yeah. And a lot of leaders would do that in order to save time, in order to help people. But if you allow them to make that mistake, and then afterwards they come and say, hey, how's this look? You're like, did you consider this? Yeah. And what that does is it gets them to start thinking, and they're going to become more resourceful for future planning missions.
Absolutely.
So like I had a major that I served under in Iraq. His name's Major Sean Kramer. I still fucking remember this guy. This guy was awesome. And he was the guy I would always go to if I needed anything, because he was the battalion XO and I was the company XO. So if I had a problem with something I had to do with supply or with mission operation planning, I would go to him and say, hey, I got this situation. And he was like, okay, well, what all have you tried? And I would go through all the things. And he would be like, okay, have you thought about this? And he would just say, like, he wouldn't tell me.
Great leadership.
Yeah.
He wouldn't tell me what to do. He would just say, have you thought about this? And it would be just enough of a seed that would lead me down the right path to start doing other things.
Yeah.
And it was always the best way. So that's what I started to adopt as a young leader, and I adopt now. Yeah. When I have agents call me and they're having challenges, I ask questions to start with what and how, always open-ended. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, so, what do you think your challenge is? How long have you been dealing with this? What have you done in order to overcome this, right? Yeah. How is it making you feel looking at this? How would you rate yourself right now? Looking at the core values, and what the core values are for the company. How are you meeting each one of these core values, right? And getting them to talk about it. And then afterwards, I'll be like, have you thought about this? And then you can just hear the gears moving, and they're like, oh shit. And that's how I can get them. They were talking, or you were talking earlier about asking the right questions. Mm-hmm. It's asking those right questions to allow them to come up with the answers. It makes them more resourceful. And then at the end of my calls, usually I'll tell them the reason I want you to come up with this information is because I think that you have a far greater potential than even you see. Yep. And I see it. Yeah. Okay. So what I need you to do is prove me right.
You know what I've seen that work too is it gives the people that are coming to you, they're thinking through the process, they're asking themselves the right questions, they're getting it to a point. If they come into you and you're like, nope, this is what I want you to do, that gets them demotivated. Mm-hmm. By asking them the right questions, now they know that you're on their team, you're in their corner, you're their coach. You're not telling them what to do. You're to the point, we're asking the right questions, and you know that they can come to you and they can get guidance and coaching from you. And it's amazing. So powerful.
And I don't mean to interrupt. I don't mean to talk over you. I'm just saying one of the most powerful questions you can ask in leadership is, what do you think the answer is? Mm-hmm. I really think that's one of the most powerful questions. Yeah. And I know Josh and I have talked about this when it comes to your kids too. You have a really good way of questioning your kids to get them to figure things out, right?
Yeah. It's becoming, and I learned this from my neuroscientist business partner, to really allow them to become scientists of themselves.
That's what you said.
Yeah. It's really, for those that are listening, or you're all going to be adults that are listening to this. So you need to be a scientist of yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's where it comes in asking better questions. So I'll give you the example that he gave me. The first time I had him on my podcast, which is the first time I met him, this was 4 years ago, I had this really proud moment as a dad. We're on the lake, my parents' lake, about an hour and 40 north of here. And there's this floating high dive.
This is a story you told me.
Yeah, so low dive, high dive.
This is a good one.
And my daughter, who was probably 7 at the time, my oldest, would have been 7. She's 11 now. And we're on the boat. I didn't choose to go off the dive with her. I was, having a beer or something. I don't know. Anyhow, so she goes out there, and my brother and a couple of the other kids go out there with her. But I turn around, and all of a sudden she's at the top of the high dive. She had never been off the high dive before. And Jenna, my wife, is sitting there going, well, she's kind of a little nervous. Josh, should you go out there? Looking at me. I'm like, no, let's let her see. Let's see what she does. And no sooner we look over and she jumps. So she comes back to the boat, and I'm like, honey, I'm so proud of you. Like, how did you, this is awesome. Like, are you proud of you? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, because it matters more that you're proud of you more than I'm proud of you.
Right.
And I thought I nailed it, right? And Raj looks at me and goes, that was good. You could have done better. I don't remember his exact words, but that's how I took it. He's like, that was good. Let me teach you a little better. He goes, because he had made all these mistakes as a father too. His kids are grown now. And so he was
his
teaching.
His background's in psychology.
His background, so he's actually an anesthesiologist, but has studied the human mind so much. He's become a neuroscientist.
That's what it is.
And so he's been studying the mind really because he got sick of his own ego. Yep. Being a high-end doctor, top of his class, all this different stuff. And he found himself being completely egotistical and really worked on himself over the last 20 years. And
good for him.
The neuroscience side of things came along with that. So he's like, what you really want is to get herself to ask her questions about, hey, why did I choose to go up there? How did I feel when I was standing there and the board's moving and swaying? Was I nervous? Was I scared? Was I excited? And then how did I feel once I overcame that? So you're identifying. So like in the next time you're in that situation or a scary situation, like, this is about what to expect. And then once I do it, I'm going to feel elated and I'm going to get those shots of dopamine. I'm gonna but us adults don't even do that. Yeah. We don't enter a situation and go, how do I feel right now? Yeah. How did I feel after the situation? You don't take inventory.
Such power.
Right. So it's like just being a scientist of yourself. And while I got the mic, I want to bring up one other idea because we've talked a lot about the question asking. But what if you don't know the right question to ask? And one way could be like, well, just start asking questions and they'll come. But there's a game I'll play with some of my coaching clients. And we call it yes and. And so let's say you're in ideation mode, creation mode, because you guys don't know what to do. And so basically what you do is someone starts with an idea and there is no wrong answer. So that's the premise. Like we cannot shit on each other's answers. Like we're in ideation mode. So we're just going to create.
Right.
So I say, and you might only like 10% of what I have to say, but you pick that 10% and you repeat it. So I say, hey, I think that we should cut down that tree out there that's growing into each other because it doesn't look right. It's not a normal tree. And you say, yes, I like that. And here's what I would do. Let's not cut down the tree because it makes the property unique. And then I go, well, yeah, I actually like that idea. And the reason I like that idea is because it leads me to this idea. So you just ideate and create and play off each other until you find where you actually can stop and go, this is the answer. So it doesn't necessarily always have to be questions. It could be just a creation mode, but you both got to be humble enough to go, because let's say that cutting down the answer, let's say I'm talking to someone that loves trees. They're like, that's a shitty fucking idea. But maybe there's 1% of it that they could go, yes, I like that. And here's what we could do differently. Yeah. And then you just keep ideating with each other till you get to the right spot.
Right. It's an exploration, right? Yep. It's an exploration through all the different potentials to come to the right answer.
Exactly.
It's also knowing the person you're talking to a degree, right? You have to know the approach.
Yeah.
And you know your kids, so. Yeah.
Well, I was just getting to an idea or a spot where it's like, let's say you're totally befuddled. You're facing a situation you've never faced before. You don't even know the right fucking question to ask. So you just walk into a room with your team and you're like, what's everyone think? That could be a shitty spot to start because then you start a cycle of everyone's in a bad spot mentally. And you just start going down, down, down versus you walk into the room and say, hey, we're going to play a game. And none of us can shit on each other's idea. We're just going to play this yes and game. And we're going to just go around and play this yes and game until we land in a spot that we all feel pretty good about, and we're walking out of this room excited with that solution. That's that exploration you said.
Dude, and I love the fact that you just pivoted right there in that conversation, because while the walk into the room, what do you guys think? Like, it's good to let people get their thoughts out on the table. It can go down a really bad slope.
Real bad, real quick.
So one of the things that I talk about heavy in my life is setting expectations. So you walked in with the pivot, your conversations now, let's play a game. We're not going to shit on each other's ideas. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And this is how it's going to go. So now everybody in the room knows exactly what the next 20, 30, 40 minutes is going to be. It's the same thing if you're in sales. It's the same thing if you've got a team that you're leading. It's the same thing if you've got a family. The more you can set the expectations and paint the picture, it's like vision casting them. Yeah. You can set the expectations to a moment. People can't question what's supposed to be happening, right? Yeah. The unknown is what actually transpires through that. But if you set the expectations kind of like the guardrails, you know where things are going to stop on their own, right? And it's so powerful in any industry to set customer expectations from a sales perspective.
Sure.
That's huge, dude. And for employees too, like, you know, some of our mentors and leaders, Andy and Ed, they talk about this a lot, is when you have a new employee or an existing employee and you're trying to help them, you show and set the expectation is like, listen, I need you to do this, this, this. I need you to learn these steps because for you, I see you one day maybe being a production manager or a shop floor person or a sales manager or something along those lines. You set the expectation that you have a bigger vision for them. And it goes back to what I was asking a bit earlier, is like, they might not see it, but you just give them a little bit, you drip into them a little bit in terms of like that little bit of information. They start to see it, they build up confidence, and eventually they become
those conversations can become very powerful if you speak to the right people.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
It's also understanding how, like, what is their basic human need and what motivates them.
Exactly.
Like, are they motivated by contribution? Are they motivated by growth? Are they motivated by significance? Right. And if you really have a good conversations with your people, you'll realize what's the thing that drives them. What is the conversation that you can have that they'll run through a fucking brick wall to get it done? Because you can tap into that human basic need and just be like, hey man, if you get this done, everyone's going to be coming to you. You're going to be the man. People are going to ask you how you did it. You're going to be put on a pedestal. We're probably going to put you in an event where you're going to speak about it. Right.
Huge.
And it's just like, because then their significance is going off. They're like, yes, I want that.
Yeah. And a lot of leaders and business owners, even experienced ones, think it's money for everyone. And like, yes, you do have to pay people and well, if they're good at what they do, but it's not the main driver for people.
Right.
Not even by I wouldn't even say less than half, I would say, are motivated by money purely. I think recognition is, in my experience, has always been the leader. I don't know if you got, of course it's going to be situationally dependent.
So I've had to get better at this because I suck at it because I don't need it. In fact, I get super uncomfortable. Even yesterday, I could barely look at the crowd as they're giving me a standing ovation because it's just uncomfortable to me to get public praise.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you probably shift the spotlight whenever you can.
It's not about me, right? It's not about me. Right. And that's what I do. But sometimes it is about you.
Right.
And that's the one thing I'm trying to get better at. But what I do, my trick is, and my business coach taught me this, is I deflect it back to God.
Right.
So like in that moment yesterday, it was about me, but in my head, I'm going, that was for God, because all my gifts and talents came from him, not from me. So that's been one way I've gotten around it. But I had to get called out by my wife because I don't need affirmation at all. And so, and I learned this because my dad never gave it to me. And so that was like it was a scar early on in my life, but then I realized it became a superpower. But then that superpower actually became a weakness when I became a leader of people. Because as I became a leader of people, most people do need recognition. Most people do need affirmation. Most people do need their leader to recognize their effort. I don't.
Right.
And in fact, I'm actually...
Because you're a great leader.
Well, but not just that, but because I never got it. Right. So I learned to live without it and become my own affirmation. And so my wife called me out on a long car drive. She goes, you never affirm me. You never, tell me I'm doing this or that. And I'm like,
she needs it.
She needs it.
Yeah.
That's what she was like. Her soul was screaming to me. She wasn't screaming at me. She was conversing with me, but it's
one of her love languages.
Yeah. Her emotions were telling me this. And she said this, and it like that needle, right? She goes, and I bet your people do too.
She gave you the truth, though. Yeah. She gave you the truth.
Yeah.
Something you didn't want to hear, but you needed to hear.
Yeah, exactly. and it was a big recognition because for the rest of that drive with the kids in the back, and I'm sitting there like stewing in that, and I'm like, I have done a poor job at this because it's not a human need of mine.
Dude, I'm the same exact way. I am literally the same exact way. I don't like to get public recognition. And I'm willing to bet that you are more of a contribution, like contributing and like helping other people, lifting other people
the impact
up.
For others, absolutely.
And then also growth, like being challenged, pushing past limitations. Those are your two basic human needs. I'm the same way. I don't like significance. I don't like to be put on a spotlight. I don't like people being like, oh man, you did awesome. It kind of makes me feel awkward. I would rather someone tell me like, dude, you did really shitty, because that drives me more than anything. Because I'm like, oh man, I'm going to go, I suck. Now it's growth time.
Yeah, because you like to grow and you like to learn.
Because I like to grow and learn. And so when those moments in time happen, when I do see it as like, like when I was speaking yesterday and people were clapping, I see it as I was able to contribute to these people. Right. I see it as not like I'm getting significance, but my pure intention was I want to provide value and leave a message with them that's going to impact them and contribute to them in some way, shape, or form.
So you use it as a recognition, but you tied it to your specific.
Yes.
That's huge. That's self-awareness 101 right there.
That's how I view it. And so, and I've been really bad about going to my team, and before in the past, over the past year, I've been working really hard about this, about reaching out to them and highlighting them for different things, because I don't need anyone to tell me I'm doing well. I'd rather than tell me when I'm doing bad.
Yeah. So let's hit on that though. Let's go down the line, because CW, you're actually really damn good at this in recognizing your team. So I think, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that listen to all of our podcasts, let's talk through each of us, maybe one key thing that we do to make sure that we're making sure our team feels special as we continue to grow, because entrepreneurs need to know that, because if you want team and loyalty and all that different shit, and you want people to stay with you long term, you got to get good at what we're talking about right here.
So excellent question. Excellent topic. This is going to be good. Good. This is awesome, Josh. I sucked at praising people. I was terrible at it because I was never praised, right? My dad was my coach. Fucking hit them harder, destroy them. And then you get into the army. Okay. Hit them harder, destroy them. There was no praise. It was just execute. Well, when I found myself in positions to where I was responsible for people's mortgages and rents, you guys know that, putting food on their table, so on and so forth. I had this culture in my first larger company. And when I say larger, it was still small, but larger for me, where they were starving for something. They were starving for something, and I can tell. And this was around the time I first read Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Classic book. Everyone should read it.
And I just finished my 8th read of it. The last book that I finished was that. I'm rereading How to Think and Grow Rich for the 8th time as well right now, but that's not the point. But when I was reading Dale, I was like, wow, I am terrible at so much in this book. And if I really want the impact and influence that I desire, I have to get better at all of this. So in that book, I know all of you guys have read it, and probably more than once. He makes you read each chapter twice before you move on. And if you do it correctly, he makes you highlight everything in a specific way to be able to go back and look at and read, because he also directs you to read it or to review it once a month. So I did that. I did it all every time that I read it. And I realized that when I started praising people in my life, and not cheap flattery, like actual praise. Like I pulled you aside, I think it was 2 or 3 times yesterday. I held you by the arm before you left last night. I was like, Josh, dude, you did a really good job, man. I'm proud of you. You know, and like, regardless of being able to receive it, I wanted to make sure you heard it,
yeah.
Right? And I learned with my team now that if I praise their actions that I like, those actions occur more often. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I used to criticize and not praise, and I still criticize a little bit. I'm not perfect, mostly myself. But if I criticize, like, Greg, man, what the fuck, dude? Like, do you really have to keep training arms? Why are you so big? You know what I mean? And I criticize
Let the rest
him.
of your body catch up, bro.
Stefan was not.
What the fuck?
Stefan was not sitting next to Greg in this interview.
Yeah. I show up here. I'm like, oh, my arms are good. Nope. Greg's here. But the point is, I would breed negativity by criticizing. So when I switched it to primarily praising, I bred more of the action that I praised for. And by no means do I consider myself a master. However, people looking in from the outside have seen it. And the culture that I now have in my umbrella of companies, right, is praise heavy. And the interesting part about it is we briefly talked about people needed recognition. I find that the non-leader needs the recognition, right? The employee needs the recognition. Well, I train my people as entrepreneurs, right? So now they're becoming leaders and they're starting to praise their family and they're starting to praise me and people that come around us. And the whole culture shift over the course of the past decade I've been in business has been phenomenal. I mean, by no means would I consider it world class, but just from that little switch to the answer to the question.
That's really powerful.
Yeah.
What have you done, Greg?
So I started doing, have you guys read Emily Furcella's Relationships First book?
I haven't yet.
I haven't, no. I heard it's good.
Book.
It's so good.
Yeah,
I
she's
have
a
never
beast.
read a book in my entire life that I physically felt the person was there talking to me
You heard her.
in my whole life.
Yeah.
It's one of the most incredible books.
Let's go. I'll get it to the list.
It's an incredible book. And after I read it, one of the things that she talks about doing is like she writes notes to her team. Mm-hmm. And all of my team's remote. Like no one's basically in DFW except for my admin or like my VP of operations. They both live in the area. And so I started going through my roster of agents and I would pick a random agent and then I would write a thoughtful letter.
Love it.
And I would make it to them. It wasn't just a can like, hey, thanks for being part of the team. Love you, dude. Like it was, hey man, I really appreciate all the hard work you've done with X, Y, Z. And it was specific to them. And I took my time and I wrote out the entire card.
Yeah.
And I started to mail every single day. I would mail a new card to a new agent. And I went through all the agents like that over like a 4-month period. And what I saw was they started to show up more.
Uh-huh.
I got agents that sent me cards back.
Yeah.
They would say they wrote cards back, started sending me cards back, and
The handwritten note, man, is so powerful.
so powerful. So like I have one of my agents wrote a really, really thoughtful handwritten card back, and it's still on my fridge to this day. Mm-hmm. And I got it back in December of last year, and it meant so much to me that he took the time. He also sent me some beard oil. He's like, hey man, here's some beard oil for your beard since you're always growing it out. and he's got this massive beard. It's like ZZ Top beard. And it was such an impact for me to do that. Like I appreciated it. Like I loved doing it. And I made it to where it's like non-negotiable. Every single day I'm going to write this. I'm going to put something in the mailbox. And I saw a massive transition. The other thing that I do is I highlight an agent every single week publicly on, we call our town hall, and we have all the agents.
Great praise.
And I highlight them and I tie it specifically to a core value.
Nice.
And so I'm like, hey, we're going to highlight this agent. Well, usually we'll tell a story about what happened and how it's tied to the core value. And then we say, because the agents don't know. They don't know that they're going to be highlighted. They don't know who's going to be highlighted. And then we bring that agent in. And then usually I'll have their manager or their upline will come in and say something nice about them. And then we open the floor for them to talk about their experience and what they appreciate so far and their appreciation for being highlighted.
There's a lot
that's
of
so
value
good.
in letting
That's
the
powerful.
team speak. Letting them get their emotional side to it out is huge.
Well, and also the core value teaching there, right? Like your team, how many businesses set core values and up and down the line, even the leaders don't even know them.
Yes,
because you're not repeating them you're not highlighting them, let alone live them, right? Yeah. You got to know them to live them.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, and there's so many lessons in that. I'll give you a couple different ones. When I had about 250 people in the firm, Chris and I just talked about this walking up here. We're both introverts. I would rather sit in my office, go meeting to meeting, and just plug along and push the business forward. But the people in my office crave a relationship with me. So once a day, I made it a point, and I made it fun to get out of my office. And here was the fun piece. I got a hoverboard. And around my 30,000 square feet on one floor.
Tell me you have this on video somewhere.
Oh yeah, there's video of this. In my custom suit and my fancy Allen Edmonds shoes all shined up, I hop on this hoverboard, this gold hoverboard with flashing lights, and cruise around the hallways and see who was in their offices or in their cubicles and say, what's up? And, if they had a good sales week or something good happened that crossed my desk, I'd make sure to give them a high five and talk to them a little bit and make sure I wasn't interrupting something they were right on task with. But if they happen to be available, stop around. And how many smiles I get just to see me rolling around with my coffee on a fucking hoverboard, right? Just something of that nature. I've always been a big fan of notes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you do train your people, right? So those notes, and she's listening, but one of the greatest gifts I've ever received was from Alicia. Mm-hmm. And all these people from my previous firm, after I was terminated, sent me texts, notes, emails, all this different stuff. And for my 1-year anniversary, she compiled it in a book.
Oh,
that's awesome.
And put it together. But then, hold on, the rest of it was blank. And she said, this is for the next chapter.
Hell yeah.
That's cool.
Right. So like you're the things that you're doing for your people are going to come back.
Yeah.
And you're just like you're doing, Greg, and letting them highlight, like it's all circular and it feeds the machine, which the machine is not only your business, but it's your energy. Yeah. It's your ethos. It's everything about it. So these are all just little tips, and you got to make it authentic to you. You can't go and do exactly what CW does or exactly what I do. You have to make it authentic to you. So you may think rolling around on a hoverboard is stupid, which it kind of was silly, but so am I. So that was a way I could make it fun and get out of my office, my corner office, and go see everyone out there and just have a little fun with it. What you got, Stefan?
Before I dive into that, I actually want to ask you a question because of what you had said earlier, where recognition to you is hard to take.
Yeah.
So that gift, while incredible, Alicia, listening in, great job. What did you go through when you sat down and read these things that people were saying about you? How did you
Such a good question.
internalize and process that?
Such a good question.
It's well, in this instance, it's super emotional because of what I went through, and these were my people, right? And to read the words and the impact that I had on their lives was super emotional. But I can accept written word. Actually, that's the one where, like, if you write me a written note or praise me in a written note, and I'm in private and able to take that as I may, versus receiving it publicly with other eyeballs on me. Like I can do that. But it's interesting as you think about grief and as you think about emotions, like it takes a ton out of you.
Yeah. And
a lot of times you don't even know it. Like even this week, like yesterday being the 2-year anniversary of my everything falling apart. This whole week I was a little bit tired. I didn't necessarily understand why. And my wife goes, well, Friday's the 16th.
And we were talking about that on the way down
and
here.
for you, same thing. Like that's your Alive Day. Like you process these emotions throughout your life, these traumas throughout your life, and underlying, right, is it just takes that energy, that mental. You don't even know what's happening.
Yeah.
So there's times like if you have those times where you're reading impactful stuff and it affects you in an emotional way, don't be surprised when your energy's not there. So you may have to go do a cold plunge or a workout to get your energy back if you got the rest of the day to proceed. But to answer your question more succinctly, like I can do it on my own, reading those words and internalizing it as it comes, but getting the public praise is still hard.
Different. So, and I love the way you answered that, because this is why, for me, there's a couple different ways I've used written word for recognition, written word for praise of team members and so forth. But to touch into why you can process that better, and for me, the reason why I write letters to people or write notes is because when you have a conversation with somebody and you praise them, a lot of times when you give somebody a praise, they get elated, right? They start thinking about the things they did and they start stopping listening to what you're saying. But when you put it in paper and you put it down on card or whatever it is, they can go back and reread this and they can reprocess it. And it actually, by putting something down on paper and letting somebody reread that thing multiple times, if that's what they want to do, it's an extremely bigger value to them, because they can go back in 2 days and read it exactly as you wrote it. And not have to think about how you said the praise in public. So there's a huge difference between the written praise versus the personal praise to it. So for myself, we do a bunch of different things in the company, but one of the things I started many years ago is anytime we get a new employee, I started it, and now I'm trying to get all my leaders and managers of the people that are being brought in. When a new employee comes in, they get a T-shirt with a company name on it, and you get a handwritten card. And that card should say a bunch of different things, but whatever you want to say. And it's more than just the, hey, thanks for joining the team thing, right? So like my VP of operations, my finance woman, and so forth and so on, as it's gone down from here on out, to date, these guys still have those cards on their corkboards, on their desk, on their wall, in their house. It's still sitting there, and it's something that they can reference back to. And what I've seen a lot of where the value of that comes from is it gets them to realize not only are they recognized from joining your team, which is cool and exciting, but they can go back and reference it again and again. And like, we've got a newer engineer manager on our team. He's been with us for about 2 months. He's from Carolina, so it's great. He's coming with us down there. I sat with him the other day because actually yesterday was his last day with us. He's moving down to Charlotte, and he's going to start working out of his home and then eventually in the new building. And I just sat with him. I was like, hey, it's been about 2.5, 3 months now. How are things going? What are you feeling? He goes, man, I got to tell you, you guys did a good job talking to me about what this company was and what the leadership was like. But being here over the last few months and getting integrated with everybody and sitting and talking, he goes, this is a place that's just generally different. Everybody cares. Everybody, talks to each other like regular humans. They let people contribute. And he goes, this isn't a place that I just want to come and do a job. I'm going to build a career here. I have, and I can see a future here. So there's an extreme value in that level of recognition because that's a place people want to come to. And it's not, they're just going to work. They're coming to their other family. They're coming to their other home, right? Yeah. And that's what I've seen it be so good. So every new employee gets a card handwritten throughout the days and so forth throughout the year. I'm not the best at it from a consistency point of view, but I do write cards when I recognize somebody for doing something great. And I usually just put a card, I slip it underneath their keyboard. So when they come in the next morning, they open it and they get to read it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people will take it home. Then I don't want a thank you back. I don't want anything back. I just want them to know I'm really appreciative of what they've done. And to your point,
you want them to be good.
Without a doubt, but you got to be specific with it. It's not just grateful that you're here. It's grateful that you're here and you tackled
unique,
this.
Specific.
Right?
It's
got to be intentional.
You did a great job on this project and this, that, and the other. That's huge. You got to get specific with what your recognition is. And then for me, Chris, actually, it's funny. When I was on your podcast, we talked about this. And I asked the question to Chris. Well, that came out wrong. I asked the question to Chris. I said, is there a point where one can become selfish about being selfless, right? And the idea of being selfless is like, I get a lot of joy in filling people's cups up.
Yeah.
Getting a smile on their face, having them recognize the answer to the decision, make it all by themselves. Like when I see that moment that clicks for them, my cup just got refilled. So I do that intentionally because that fills my cup up. I know that's my reward, the contribution part to it. I'm big on contribution. So it's a unique thing for myself. Like if you're, and we talked about it, and I think what we came down to at the end of the day, you can be selfish about being selfless when your intention is to be that person for somebody else, to fill their cup up, to give them that praise.
100%.
If the intention's good, it's not a bad selfish. Right. It's a good selfish. So I try to do that just generally throughout my life and my world and friends I have growing up and so forth. It's just finding ways to tell them you're proud of them, that they did something. And I mean, that alone, like, to your point, like growing up, and you guys were even saying this, maybe your parents weren't around or friends weren't around and they didn't say those things to you. There could be a bunch of other people in this world that never had somebody say, I'm damn proud of you.
Yep. Yeah.
And you knowing the value of what that is and just pouring into somebody about that is huge. When somebody says you're proud of you, like I'm proud of you, that's one of the most rewarding feelings I think a human can get.
That's a statement that I use quite regularly with everyone in my life. Because I never heard it, and you understand it too. And it changes fucking people, man. It really does.
My dad gives that to me, he says it to me. He doesn't say it that often.
Right.
So, and I'm actually a little grateful to it because it can be worn out. It's like every 5 minutes, like, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Right.
It's like, all right, cool.
It becomes sarcastic.
Exactly, right? So when he does say this and he pulls it aside, like my dad grew up, was born in 41. For the first 7 years of his life, he lived in the Black Forest. After year 7, he was introduced to his mom and dad. He didn't even know who they were, right? And then his dad died when he was 14. His mom ran the business, grew it from 300 to 1,000 people. So there wasn't this loving family around that was always hugging, kissing, sharing that pride and so forth. So when my dad does this and he takes those moments to say, I'm proud of you, dude, that hits me right in the heart. Direct shot. All day long, because I know it's coming from a place of absolute sincerity.
There's another layer also when it comes to the cards, I think, especially when you receive a card or when you receive a card, like you were saying that when you get that kind of praise in written form and you can absorb it in your own alone time, I agree with that. But it's also sometimes it like refocuses your vision because it reminds you of the things, of the impacts that you're making in life. So like, for instance, I got a card. It was literally last week from a random guy that I hadn't seen. He's in the insurance industry. We were going to work together. We ended up not. He kind of went another path, but he's kept in contact, and he's been watching a lot of my content. And so he hadn't reached out to me. He hadn't said anything really. He just wrote me a card and he sent it in the mail, and I got it. And I was like, man, what's this guy do writing me? And it was this beautiful card. It was, really well written, really long. I even took a picture of it. I sent it back to him. I was like, dude, this was the most touching shit that I've ever received. And it happened to come on a day that I was kind of down, because I like all of us, we have our ups
always comes at
downs.
the perfect time, right?
And I was a little down. I'm like, man, I'm
fate.
Like, I don't know about this coaching thing, and I'm like struggling on it because it's a lot of work.
That's one of those days, huh?
Yeah. And I'm like, am I making an impact on these people? And and I'm sitting there like questioning myself. And then this guy who's not even in my coaching program,
Right.
but he's like, dude, I see you, and you're making a fucking impact.
Yeah.
And it reminded
That's
me.
huge.
What you reminded me of, I had a great system, and this will actually work for you, and I totally forgot it. Because you're in the insurance industry, when I was in financial planning, we're asking people to come in and take the bet on themselves in a 100% commission world, right? When they would put in a certain amount of effort and hit a benchmark, there was a notable benchmark, we wouldn't just put congrats to them, we'd send a letter to their spouse. And or if we had an intern do a significant thing, we did it to their parents. And so for their parents to receive that recognition, or the spouse to receive that recognition and say, hey, and with the spouse card, it was more about, we know the support and effort that goes in behind the person, because no person is successful without a supportive and loving home. Yeah. In fact, I even, in my final interviews with people, I had them bring their spouse in.
I love that.
And the reason was,
Never
the biggest reason was,
I've done it. It's huge.
Well, so part of this was, I think it may differ depending on like if it's a salary position or not. Like, imagine going 100% commission, you're essentially starting your own business. Right? Whether it's a full entrepreneurial thing or you have the support like we gave, doesn't matter. They're going to have to do some work that they've never done before. So we wanted to make sure that the spouse was supportive, because and I would say this out loud and almost verbatim every time, is I've never seen someone with an unsupportive spouse become successful in this business. I've seen plenty of people fail with supportive spouses, but I've never seen someone become a success with an unsupportive spouse. Because that, like, you're taking a beating all day, getting told no on the phone, getting rejected, all the different stuff that you go through in commission sales. And then you go home and get beat up too. I told you not to fucking do that. I told you not to go down that path. It's never going to work. So we wanted to make sure that the spouse was on board. And then once they were doing, the job, doing the work, it's like making sure that we recognize that spouse just as much as we're recognizing that person that's putting in the effort.
Yeah. So I want to add to that, because that's a great point. Anybody who's interviewing people or running a business and trying to hire people, we always do interviews. We get to know the people, right? That's the mission, is get to know the person that's joining your team. I always spend the last 10, 15 minutes of an interview to let them get to know us, right? What questions do you have for us? Because
reverse interview.
Did they come prepared, right? Because you don't want a person that's just like, oh, I want to grow. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. I just want to grow. Like, no. Well, I want to know about your business. I want to know about your mission, your vision. I always also say, especially if it's closer to the weekend, I'm like, listen, we're not going to make a decision today. Even if I know this person would be great on my team. I said, I want you to go home. I want you to talk about this back home with your support staff, family, friends, loved ones, whatever. And if needed, have them call me directly, because I want to know that they are also on board with this. As much as I'm interviewing you for a job with us, you need to make sure that this fits your life, your vision, and your mission.
Everything.
Right. And then to the point you just made, what I've seen really work is getting to know the spouses if that opportunity brings to the table, like if they actually are willing to come in and meet. Not only are you wondering whether they have the right support at home, but if they don't have the right support at home, you know that person might need a different level of leadership and a different level of coaching. Every single person on your team needs a different level of coaching and leadership. So if you know that ahead of time, you can build a different trajectory and a different way that person gets coached, or you can coach their manager how to lead them better.
Yeah.
Because they have to go home and they're going to get beat up at home or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That's wearing on people.
Yeah.
They want to come to work, and now because they know they got your back at work and you're there all the time for them, they get better, they grow better, they flourish within an organization when they know you got your back.
I was going to ask you guys, so what you guys do, unique hiring methods or like interviewing methods for hiring, since you kind of brought it up. I'd like to see if you guys have anything unique that you do.
Yeah, mine are,
we can close it out.
Yeah, mine are pretty simple. I'm sure you guys probably do this. I let the team make the decision. But one of the biggest things I do if I'm involved is I'll take them out to lunch, and I don't ask them anything business or technical related. I watch how they interact with the wait staff. I watch how they interact with people around me. Do they hold the door? Do they not? Do they treat the waitress or waiter like an actual person, or is it all about them? I watch their mannerisms. I watch their table manners. I watch how they eat. I watch everything. If they're a piece of fucking shit, I don't tell them. I just say, have a nice day, basically. But I hire the person. I am decent at training, I would say, so I can teach the skill, but I want a good person. So if they align with the values, if they align with my team, and they align with me, and they can actually interact in public with people, then they can interact with my customers and my clients and my team and me. Yeah.
I like that. That's really unique. I like that.
Henry Ford. I got that from Henry Ford. Henry Ford used to do that on his initial jump up. He would take engineers out till dinner and just watch how they interact with people, how they eat. If they added salt to the food first before tasting it, he knew that they couldn't make decisions. They just knew what they wanted. Like they were programmed. They didn't taste the food first. Does it need salt? Yes, no. Then put it on, and he would cut people just for putting salt on the food first.
Amazing.
Wow.
There's someone I know locally, so this is a little bit off me, but that does exactly what you do, but takes it up a little bit notch, and you may want to add this. So they go to the same restaurant every time. They have the same server if they can, but the manager there knows the deal, and they actually purposely have the server screw something up.
I've heard about this.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's a great tool, because then you see how they interact. Do they actually, and like actually not screw up just once, but like it's a kind of a miserable experience.
They have to handle conflict.
Yeah. Can they handle, and how do they talk down to this person? Do they set them aside or pull them aside and say, hey, you having an all right day?
Yeah.
Because there's been like, actually, I know what they do. They have the server spill something on them.
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah. And see how they handle it.
Really show you somebody's character.
Yeah. Right. So that could take your lunch interview up a notch. I'll talk about how Alicia and I came together. So this is a more higher level hire than just say a rank and file. She was in New York City at the time. I was here. This is during COVID, by the way. So she's trapped in her apartment in New York City. So we're getting to know each other, but we didn't have any in-person interviews until she had moved back, and I think maybe even hired. But what we did was had a lot of conversations, and I think we read 3 or 4 books together because I was hiring her to be an integrator, to me being the visionary. For those of you that have read Rocket Fuel, that was one of the books that we read together. We also read Force and The Founder and a Force Multiplier, which is another book that was recommended to us. And then we also met with my business coach together to make sure, because this is such a key hire that we had to make the right decision. Make sure it was the right fit, right person, and we were going to work cohesively together. So I would just say that with those key hires, really take your time. Really make sure that it's like the hire slow, fire fast methodology in that regard.
Yep.
So I love what you do. I had another mentor of mine that would go on a drive with someone to have meaning they'd have the person drive and see how they interacted with traffic and all that different things.
See if they're angry with road rage.
Yeah. So similar to the lunch thing. Yeah. So it's just getting people, or I think the one of the things that I have done is I would host recruiting events and when I was looking for advisors to see how they interacted with multiple people in the room. And I'd purposely have leaders on my team, all of them have different conversations with these certain people. Then we'd come together and say who impressed you the most and how they worked the room, interacted with all of you. And then we'd, start kind of interviewing from there. But either way, it's making sure that because when they come in for an interview, you're getting their Sports Center top 10. Mm-hmm. You're not getting the Sports Center bottom 10. Mm-hmm. They're not going to tell you how they suck.
The not so top 10.
They're not the not so top.
You get the social media.
You're getting their social media highlight reel.
Yeah.
So what you need to do in your interview process, or however you call it, your recruiting process, or just getting to know someone before you hire them, is how do they act in real life?
Right.
How do they interact with people that are quote unquote below them, like you do with the server? Mm-hmm. And how do they work a room? How do they interact? Because they're going to represent your brand.
Right.
So you got to make sure that to the best that you can, because anyone can say, oh, your core values are integrity, courage, growth. Right. Yeah, I have all that. Right. That's me to a T.
Okay.
Well, let me experience this in action and see if that actually is you to a T.
Yeah. Because everyone's going to say they're a hard worker until there's
work to be done.
Yeah. So what I do is I have them do an application, and then after the application, they have to send a 30 to 60 second selfie video of why they want to succeed and why they feel that our company is going to help them to take them to their goals, right? And so you'd be surprised how many people send selfie videos and they're like laying in their bed.
Are you serious?
Yeah. It's just like that right there, just automatic no-go, not interested, right? And then also people will be like, hey, we'll give them the instructions like, hey, go do it. And then it'll take them like 2 weeks to do it. Not interested. Not interested in that. So then once they've returned that, they get sent a link to schedule their first interview with my VP of operations. And he just asks them questions about them, make sure that they're a good fit. Mm-hmm. A lot of open-ended questions, learns about who they are, what their life is like. And then he gives them a homework assignment, and we give them to read the first 3 chapters in The Magic of Thinking Big. Mm-hmm. And then we want them to take notes, handwritten notes of what they took away from it, and then take a picture of those notes and send it back to him. And then he will send the link for the following interview. We get people that are like, that just disappear. They don't do it because they don't want to read. We get people that send in typed notes. That means they don't follow instructions. We get people that take 2 weeks because we don't give them a time frame.
Right.
And so it's the people that like do it as instructed. They pay attention to the instructions, and then they also do it in a timely fashion, like within a 48-hour period. And then it's like, hey, we want to have a last interview with you.
You want to talk to them.
Huge.
And then that's where I come in, and I'm like, hey, here's who we are, and this is what we do. So how can I marry up this company to get you where you want to go? How can I provide the most value to you?
I love that.
Right.
Especially because a lot of the people that are coming in, they're kind of running their own business within your business kind of thing.
Yeah.
So cool to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
I actually break it down to a very simple question that I gain so much value in who the person is and thinks and so forth and so on. It's really simple, and it's always the first question we ask in an interview. Tell me something amazing about yourself.
Yeah, you've said this before.
I really don't care what the answer is unless it's a wild story. Like if you were to come in and tell me something amazing about some of your...
Like a Greg story?
Like a Greg story. If a Greg story came in, I'd be like, dude, I'm going to hang out with this guy.
Sit down.
We're going to be vibing, right?
Yeah. What you guys don't know is that I'm going to be on the comedic circuit soon. I'll be doing tours on my stories.
So the reason I asked that question is, and what I'm looking for is a few things. One, are they quick at being able to answer a question that's relatively simple?
Yeah.
Are they all work focused? So this person's all work. They don't have a personal life.
Right.
If they go into a personal story, maybe they have some cool personal story.
Right.
But the thing that I'm looking for the most, which you'll see right away, what do they think about themselves? Mm-hmm. Do they have a relationship with themselves?
Yeah.
Because if you have a relationship with yourself and you've taken the time to get to know yourself, they're going out to lunch, they're doing the events, they're doing all the other stuff, you're going to see that transpire there. Mm-hmm. But right away, if you know somebody has a relationship with themselves, they're very comfortable to talk about themselves in an amazing way.
Yeah.
Right. Or maybe a struggle they've gone through or something else. I've had plenty of people come in, they're like, should it be a work story? Should it be a, what like, they're timid. They don't handle, pressure really well. So there's so much value in asking a question that basic and how they respond and what they talk about. And like I said, if it's a cool story, then maybe you can go have beers with this guy or, go on a fishing trip or something along those lines. Yeah. But the power in that question, tell me something amazing about yourself, goes miles for who they are.
So gentlemen, this is a great, fantastical talk. I appreciate you guys all doing this.
This is a good idea. This is a really good idea. Yeah. Well done, boys.
Yeah. We do a road circuit like this.
We should do a road circuit like this.
Thanks for hosting, Josh.
Hey, you bet.
Josh, this is awesome, man.
Oh, thanks for being here, guys. This is obviously anytime we can get great minds in the studio, magic's going to happen.